Texas doesn't feel like the rest of the US because it operates by different rules. It runs its own power system. It has legal quirks left over from when it was a republic. And Texans even say the states when they leave. That's not branding. Those choices still decide who wins, who pays, and what breaks when things go wrong. In the next 9 minutes, the grid, the land rules, and the border world. Start with the one that can flip modern life off like a switch. Electricity. Texas isn't just big. It's built on rules that didn't come from the same place as the rest of the US. Texas relies mainly on ERCOT, a largely Texas-only grid built to keep control inside the state. Most of the US is connected through two major interconnections, the eastern and western. Texas mostly isn't. Those giant interconnections let power flow across state lines, smoothing out demand and sharing backup when things get tight. Here's the weird part. Texas deliberately stepped out of that club, keeping most of its electrons inside its own border to avoid extra federal regulation. That meant more flexibility for Texas regulators and companies. Faster approvals. An energy system tuned to local priorities, from oil and gas to wind farms in West Texas. But like everything in Texas, that trade-off is big. And when that trade-off fails, it fails at scale. Imagine this. You wake up in Houston. It's 2 a.m., it's freezing, and the lights have been out for hours. Your phone battery is dying. The house is getting colder by the minute. And on the satellite map, the rest of the country is still glowing. In moments like that, the independent grid stops being just a fun fact. It becomes a reminder that isolation isn't free. When Texas gets into trouble, it can't always lean on its neighbors the way other states can. So our first clue is simple. Texas will trade shared safety for local control. Once you see that pattern in the power system, you start spotting it in land, law, and even identity, a parallel system running inside the US. Long before it joined the United States, Texas spent nearly a decade as an independent republic, recognized by countries like France and Britain. That short experiment left one very long legacy: land. When most Western states came into the Union, huge areas ended up under federal control. Texas made a different deal. It kept control over most of its public lands instead of handing them to Washington. This is where Texas flips the usual American rule. In much of the West, the map is dominated by federal land. In Texas, it's overwhelmingly private. That shaped a culture built on ownership. Vast ranches, oil and gas rights, and later, endless suburbs spreading over once rural fields. Because private land, in Texas, is the default. The legal system backs that up with its own quirks. Texas has unusually strong homestead protections. In many cases, your primary residence is shielded from certain kinds of creditors. That idea comes straight from frontier logic. In a bad season or a bad deal, lawmakers didn't want families completely wiped out. You might lose a lot, but not the roof over your head. Add in no state income tax and a heavy reliance on property and sales taxes, and you get a very specific feeling. Keep what you earn, protect what you own, and fund your community through the ground you live on. On paper, it's tax codes, deeds, and exemptions. In practice, it tells every Texan, from ranch owners to suburban families, that their patch of land is more than property. It's a tiny, semi-sovereign space. First the power system, now the land. Step by step, Texas starts to look less like one state in a uniform country and more like a place that kept running its own playbook. To really understand why Texas feels different, you have to go to its edge, and then realize it isn't really an edge at all. Along the Rio Grande, Texas shares over 2,000 kilometers of border with Mexico. Cities like El Paso, Laredo, and Brownsville don't just sit next to another country. They sit inside a shared border world. Here, it's normal to navigate languages, media, family ties, and commerce that cross the line every day. Work on one side, family on the other, news and entertainment flowing in both directions. Picture a teenager in Laredo, morning classes in English, lunch with grandparents who still prefer Spanish, weekend trips across the bridge to visit cousins or shop. For them, the border isn't a wall, it's a daily commute. That creates an identity that blends two worlds and doesn't really match the standard US template. It's deeply Texan, deeply tied to Mexico, and older than the modern line on the map. And over all of this sits the idea of Texas, a story the state has been exporting for generations. Cowboys, big horizons, big trucks, big hats, and a simple promise: we do things our way. Take the phrase, "Don't mess with Texas." It started as a slogan to stop people littering on highways, just an anti-trash campaign. But it fit the Texas self-image so perfectly that it turned into a kind of shield. Today, it's printed on shirts, bumper stickers, and billboards, as if it were a warning label for the entire state. When a place sees itself as unique, people act to keep it that way. Politicians invoke Texas values. Companies sell Texas-style everything. New arrivals are told, "You're in Texas now," like they've crossed more than a state line. Put it all together: the ERCOT power system, the land rules of a former republic, and the border world that blends two countries, and Texas starts to look less like a normal state and more like a parallel system that just happens to sit inside the U.S. Texas isn't just a cultural stereotype. It has a population rivaling entire nations, an economy larger than many countries, and a central role in energy, agriculture, tech, and trade. So when Texas makes choices based on its own logic about electricity, land, or the border, the impact doesn't stop at its outline. It ripples across the United States and into the wider world. Once you see Texas as more than a state, as a system that quietly functions like a country, the map of America never looks quite the same again. Enjoyed this? Comment, like, and subscribe for more.